Tahu Pōtiki maraka maraka, te tai tonga maraka maraka, te iwi Māori matatu matatau. Ko te pōtitanga rua mano e rua takau mātoru, tēnei e haere ake nei. Kia ora, good evening and welcome back to the Hui Māori Electorate debates. And tonight it's the electorate of Te Tai Tonga, geographically the biggest electorate in Aotearoa, New Zealand. It comprises all of Te Waiponamu, Rakiura and the Chathams and extends into the North Island, including Te Whanganui-a-Tara Wellington and parts of the Hutt Valley as far as Avalon. It has over 37,500 registered voters with a high turnout of 75% in the 2020 elections. This is the Hui Te Tai Tonga Electorate Debate, Te Pōtitanga 2023. Ngā mate o te wā haramai haere. Huri tū mai kia tātou kei te Aotearoa, ti hewa mauriora, and welcome to this, the Te Tai Tonga Electorate Debate, Te Pōtitanga 2023. And as you can see, we have the two leading candidates in the Te Tai Tonga race with us here tonight. He is the candidate representing Te Pāti Māori. He uri no kaitahu Kāti Mamoe, Ngāti Kuia, Ngāti Apa, Rangitāne, Ngāti Kaungunu, me Ngāti Porou, Tāku Te Wheres. Tēnei kami hia tuki a koe.
Kia ora, kia ora.
And he is the sitting MP of Te Tai Tonga from the Labour Party. He uri no Ngaitahu, me Ngāti Hine, the Honourable Rino Tirikātene. Tēnei kami hia tuki a koe.
Tēnā koe kara.
Tēnā kōrua. No maira, no maira. Now, we have upheld the traditional process of deciding who will make their 1 minute address to voters by way of something called toka, kuti kuti and pepper. E hoa, Rino, you won the toka, kuti kuti and pepper tikanga and chose to speak second. So, to open the 1 minute addresses to the voters and the people of Te Tai Tonga tonight, we turn to you, Tāku Te Wheres, e hoa tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, Jules. O tira kei te iwi, tēnā rā tātou I te āhuatanga o tō tātou wiki, te wiki o te reo Māori, me tōna marama e haere ake nei, kia kahara kia tātou. My name is Tāku Te Wheres and I'm standing for the Māori Party. And Te Pāti Māori is an independent Māori voice in Parliament for us. And we've demonstrated over the last 3 years that it's an important voice for us to have. E te iwi, as we go forward, Te Pāti Māori stands for a tiriti-centric Aotearoa. An Aotearoa hou, and what that might look like is a nation where people understand their constitutional rights as of Te Tiriti o Waitangi and how democracy works in relationship to it. Te Pāti Māori, we put whānau first, whānau before politics, whānau before profit, and we think in terms of mokopuna thinking and mokopuna decisions. So as we head into this election at te whānau, think about your mokopuna, what they need well down the track, and make a good mokopuna decision. Vote your Māori Party candidate in, party vote for Te Pāti Māori. Kia kahara, kia tātou.
Tāku tā, tēnei ka mihi atu kia koe. Now to you, Rino Tirikātene.
Tēnā koutou I te whānui o te Tai Tonga. Tēnā koutou e ngā mātā waka. Ko hau tēnei ko Rino Tirikātene, tā koutou punonga e mihi atu nei kia koutou. Tēnā koutou I te wiki o te reo Māori. Tēnā tātou katoa. I'm honoured to be the Member of Parliament for Te Tai Tonga, the largest electorate in the country, the great southern and distant islands to the capital city. Within Māori, the role in abundance of our people. I am proud to have been the member of Te Tai Tonga and a minister in this Labour government that is delivering for our people, record gains for our people. We've had $1 billion of investment, targeted investment to Māori each year of this past term. Te aka whai ora, Māori health, Māori housing, Māori justice, te matatini. All of those aspects have been led by our wonderful Māori caucus and Māori ministers. So we are delivering for our people, but there is a risk. It is at stake with the National Act hostile potential government. And so I'm encouraging our whānau that we need to vote, we need to have the faith, kia u ki te whakapono, poti mai, mō te ropu reipa, and reno tiri kātene mō te taitonga, so we can keep the good work going for our people. Kia ora tātou.
Rino tēnā koe, tēnā kōrua, ia kōrua hakapuakitanga mai. Our Hui reporters have been busy preparing to ascertain the main issues in the Te Taitonga electorate from the people of Te Taitonga themselves. Our reporter, Mariana Johnson, herself a descendant of Tahu Pōtiki and Rangitane, went home to the Ngaitahu Takiwā to get a sense of the key issues for the people of Te Taitonga. Kia mā takitaka ake rā tātou ki tēnei kohinga kōrero, kohinga whakaaro.
Oh, Dunedin's a lovely place, yeah. Not too big, not too small. There's lots to do and see around here.
Not the weather. Probably the culture. Good mix of people.
Some good parties?
Yeah, when I'm not studying.
Oh, that's the right answer. Kia ora. I'm Mariana Johnson, and I'm here in Ōtepoti, Dunedin, in the Te Taitonga electorate, which stretches all the way from Wellington to Stewart Island. And I want to find out what are the issues that matter to people here.
The biggest thing for me is I think there's been a jump in rent prices and obviously food. Sometimes it's very hard to buy enough food for the week or paying your rent on time.
Yeah, I guess just inflation, just cost of living, everything coming up, making it a bit harder for people to just provide for their whānau.
I think everyone's feeling the pinch. It would just be nice if we focused more on shoring up education and healthcare and letting families have more opportunities and not have to stress so much about everything on a day-to-day basis.
The deterioration of our environment is just a big thing, and the health of the environment for our people is really important. So that, and probably cost of living, especially as a student, it's very hard when the rent down here and it's very cold, so power is very high.
I guess the fair taxing is a big one, actually. Yeah, fair taxing.
What would you like to see changed there?
A wealth tax and also a capital gains tax, for sure. They're really important, I think.
So an issue that is really dear to my heart and the heart of my whānau is oral health, particularly for Māori to achieve oral health equity.
I'm doing a lot more full dental clearances, so removing all of the teeth of people rather than just some of the teeth. Yeah, people are accessing us at the dental school a lot more.
And what do you think's driving that?
Poverty, yeah. Poverty, yeah.
I'd like to see us be more brave as a country and make some big decisions like public transport. We've got a rail system. I would love if that worked. And I guess I'd like if we looked out for each other a bit more.
Health is really important too, especially for, as Māori, trying to be a doctor and looking at the health of my own people. It's obviously not working our health system, so a lot of that I think has to do with the perspective of Māori and actually listening and wanting to listen to them and find out what our needs are.
Listen to the people, ne? Listen to not only the North Island, but also the South Island, right? Because I feel like people forget that Te Waipounamu exists.
And there you have it. It's no surprise that being a student city, cost of living is top of the issues here in Ōtepoti, Dunedin. And dental health care is a big concern too. They've laid down the wero, and now the question is, what are you going to do about it?
Ngai wi o te taitonga tēnā koutou, ngai wi Māori, ngā tangata Māori o te poti ki o te poti, tēnei kamihia ke kia koutou katoa. Right, let's answer that point in particular, the point made about dental care. This is a major issue for all age groups. So, Rino Tirikatene, your response to the question on dental care?
Oh, well, we've announced our policy that we want to make free dental care for under 30s with a progression to universal dental care for everyone. There should be no whānau, no student, no one who has to not go to the dentist because of the cost. And we're seeing that there is literally 1.2 million Kiwis that do that every year. So we are focusing on the age group of up to 30 because we know that in that, especially in the 18 to 30 bracket, there's a lot of it needs a lot of care and attention. We're not going to be giving a Rolls-Royce service. It's obviously examinations, checkups, fillings, extractions. but it's ensuring that there is quality, there is accessible oral health for our whānau.
Ko te mea ke, ka arohau ki ngā kaumātua. And what are you going to do and say to those kaumātua who say they need dental care now and they can't afford it and you're going to leave them behind as a result of your party's policy?
We have to start somewhere, and that's why we are doing it to up to 30s, and then we want to progressively increase it. It's not that we would love to, but we can't do everything all at once. These are hard decisions that we have to make when you're in government. But we know that if we do start with the cohort between 18 to 30, we can make very good progress and ensure that they're actually focusing on prevention from then on. Our kaumātua, well, a lot of them, like my mum, in those days, they had extractions and false teeth. So we want to get to the point where that doesn't happen these days, and that's why we're starting progressively with that. But look, Labour's always been the party about universal health care, and now we want to be the party which brings in universal dental care.
Just not next year. Tauku Te Whereras, your policy, the Māori Party's policy, in response to that dental care question.
Well, the Māori Party policy is very clear. All whānau earning under $60,000 free dental care. I need to just preface it by restating what the tax policy is, because this is how it all gets paid for. So there is a wealth tax in the Māori Party tax policy. There is a capital gains tax. There will be a foreign companies tax. There's a vacant house tax, a vacant land tax, and that's all efforts to tax money out of the rich in the places that they hide their wealth and make it available to those who need extra support right across our community. So we're talking about 3 million people, raising up 3 million people. That's where the extent of this work would go. It would ensure that we could deliver free dental for all whānau under $60,000 in income. So that captures all of our whānau who are living below the poverty line. It captures all of our kaumātua. And it means that people just have the choice. We all know that our whānau don't go to the dentist because the first thing that crosses their mind is the cost. So this policy takes away their consideration, enables them to
I will delve into the wealth tax and also CGT later on. However, that accrues enough money, surely, doesn't it, to apply a universal dental care policy? But that's not what you're doing.
Well, in terms of the people who need it the most, start there. And so the tax policies of Te Pāti Māori claw out $16 billion of pre-existing money. And it's made available to be spread across the broad base at the bottom. And like I said, this policy in particular around dental will affect more than 3 million people. It also ensures that we get free primary health care to the same cohort of people, more than 3 million people, and it has ongoing effects.
And those are all grand figures and statements, but it's totally unworkable, because to actually implement all of those taxes that he's talking about, you actually need to be driving the bus of government. And the Te Pāti Māori is not going to be ever in a position to do that. And realistically, we have to govern not only for the interests of Māori, which we take everywhere we go, but we have to do it on behalf of Aotearoa as a whole.
But this is from a government that said after the 2017 and indeed 2020 elections that it would focus on a wellbeing budget and it would look and try and remove child poverty. Now, surely this government has failed on both of those things as we look at the cost of living today.
Oh, I beg to differ. We have lifted 77,000 tamariki out of policy. We have boosted incomes for those that need it the most. We have raised benefits the most in a generation. We have raised the minimum wage extraordinary amounts, $7 extra an hour for those on the minimum wage. The National Act Party, who are the real foe here, voted against all of that. That is what we are up against. We need to ensure that we stay to continue the work program that we are doing, which is supporting our whānau, to drive lifts in those incomes. And ultimately, it all comes down to the economy, to ensure that we have a productive economy, rising wages and well-being for our whānau.
I understand the line from the Labour Party. They want to talk about national ag. We are here for the people of Te Taitonga and trying to focus on the issues for the people of Te Taitonga. But Takuta, isn't he right? This is a Labour government that has invested hugely into Māori, into the Māori population over the last 2 terms of this government.
Well, let me just start by saying that our tax policy has been rigorously tested. Okay, the $16 billion is there. It comes down to the decisions, and the decisions that politicians are willing to make, and how much pressure and leverage a party can achieve. And Te Pāti Māori demonstrated that we're capable and smart enough to leverage against whichever government is in power to get more gains for our people.
And Te Pāti Māori has been in opposition the past 3 years. We have delivered by the work of our own ministers, including myself, for our people. I just want to
raise one more question to Tautu, if I can, and then we'll go to a quick break. And the question is this: surely, out of the investment that the Labour Party has made into Māori, there have been gains and outcomes for the people of Te Taitonga. What's your response to that?
Well, look, it's been 6 years of the Labour Party, and we've incrementally gained budget gains amounting to 2%. That's less than 1% every year. 0.33% year on year by the Labour government. So we can never expect to raise our people up out of poverty if that's all we're asking for, or that's all we're driving for. We have to be aspirational. Don't settle for what we just can't do it.
Fortunately, we're going to be able to continue the kōrero when we talk about our next kaupapa after this break. We are going to be talking more with our leading candidates out of the Te Taitonga electorate debate. Tauku Te Wheres from the Māori Party and Rero Tiri Kātane from the Labour Party. Stay with us with the Hui Te Taitonga electorate debate. Kia ora mai anō, ko te rohe o Te Taitonga tēnei, e whakaariki nei ki runga I tā tātou hui I tēnei wā. Te hewa mauri ora ki ngā rohe pōti Māori e. You're watching the Hui Te Taitonga electorate debate with the two leading candidates. From Te Pāti Māori, we have Tauku Te Wheres, and from the Labour Party, Rero Tiri Kātane. Let's take you now to the first of our questions from voters and the electorate of Te Taitonga now. Mea nei, te pātai I te takiwā.
Tēnā tātou, huri tēnei no Ngāti Kahungunu, Waikato me ngai tahu, ko Isaac Smiler tōku ingoa. A particular issue that's been on my mind and the mind of my family has been the cost of food. We struggle to understand why it's so expensive, seeing that New Zealand is such an amazing producer of food. We have the ability to feed up to 40 million people here, and we have a population of about 5 million. And yet when we go to the supermarkets, we still struggle with those costs. So my question is what do you guys plan to do to tackle the cost of food? Are there any long-term plans that can put the production and distribution of food more into the hands of Kiwis as opposed to in the hands of the two major food companies that dominate New Zealand's food?
Tēnā koe e hoa e Isaac I tāu nei pātai, e ao te pātai. Let's get answers to your question on the cost of food now. Tauku Te Wheres, your response.
Well, GST off kai. It's the simplest thing to do right now to help our whānau be able to afford food in their tamariki's mouths, kai on the table. It's a simple step. The Labour government have happily stepped up to take GST off fruit and veg. There seems to be some tension around what's the list going to be, if it's going to be everything. Well, if we need to just advance it a little bit more, why don't we make it fruit, veg, meat, prawa and dairy? You know, that's a simple 5-piece list, but that's our approach. Food off GST, GST off food, immediately, ease the pressure on our people, and then going forward, there are bigger conversations around the model, the economic model that the country has. We're stuck in a capitalist model. In the capitalist model, the few at the top benefit. They benefit and they retain all of the control, power, authority over that system. And if we don't contest the existing model, we will always get what we've always gotten, and we will always be at the bottom of that model. So kia kaharata kia tātou.
Reno Tirikatene, your response to Isaac and his pātai?
Well, absolutely. As Takuto has mentioned, we are going to take GST of fresh fruit and vegetables. That's just one part of a 10-point cost of living program that we have to alleviate those pressures on whānau. As I've mentioned before, we've provided boost to income supports, working for families, which will be providing extra income. I do agree that we need to look more holistically and promote more marakai amongst our communities, bring that back. But in terms of the actual food, we are massive producers of food in this country, as you know, and Māori are massive players in the primary industries. And I would like to think that across our Māori economic interests, we could also have a role to play in that, because it is counterintuitive to see that the food prices are so high.
And massive producers of kai into Taitonga.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The food bowl of Aotearoa. So let me ask this question then. A wealth tax has been talked about, CGT, fruit and veg, GST. Why hasn't the Labour government, or why didn't the Labour government look at a wealth tax as a way of acquiring more resource, more funding to be able to apply GST of all kai, particularly now given the question that Isaac has raised?
Well, as I said, a carve-out for GST is not uncommon. It actually happens in similar jurisdictions, including Australia. So we're not an outlier when it comes to that policy. In terms of the broader wealth tax issues, we're doing further work on that. It requires further work and consideration and ultimately approval by our Cabinet to be able to implement a new policy. But we are working our way through all of those issues. Just at the moment, in terms of the global situation that we're in, and the being able to fully cost our policies, we are very taking to the people. We will be taking GST off fresh fruit and vegetables.
So just so I'm clear, on behalf of the people of Te Taitonga, you support a wealth tax?
I support in principle a wealth tax. I think everyone would do that, but it requires a lot of policy development, and just like anything, you can't just make all these taxes just happen. It requires a lot of work and consideration. We are very confident in the policy that we are taking to the people. It's fully costed, and we know that we can implement it, and we know it's going to alleviate the cost of living pressures. But there are the bigger goal here is the economy. We want to ensure, as we are seeing, the economy is growing, and so inflation is coming down. So we want to, that's the ultimate way we will alleviate those pressures.
Takuta Ferris, if GST is taken off all kai, as proposed by Te Pāti Māori, how do we ensure that those cost savings are passed down to whānau?
Yeah, ka pai, Jules. Well, essentially, if the GST is taken off kai, then 15% of the money that's in the pocket of our whānau stays in the pocket of our whānau. If we implement our tax policy, then all of our whānau that are earning under $30,000, they're going to keep the whole $30,000. Mm-hmm. So it's in the current economic situation that we're in, it's going to be very hard to raise the quality and the value of New Zealand goods. So we have to work out how we keep more money in the hands of our whānau that are in low incomes and our whānau that are in poverty. There's 100,000 people in poverty in this country, and 60% of them are Māori. The Labour Party were here 3 years ago. They had costed plans that time, and we're still here this time. And things have got incrementally worse. Labour Party's had a majority government for 3 years. They could have implemented policies kia maro te haere, bringing the majority of the people up across that 3 years, but they've elected not to. And so we're still here talking about incremental change and incremental advancement when we should be demanding significant change, system change.
Isn't that sound economic approach, though, given what's happening globally? I mean, look at what's happening with property in China, look at what's happening with the war in Ukraine and the impacts that has had, and even the way in which we can get goods and services into Aotearoa now from overseas, which is a bit of a hangover from what happened in COVID. Isn't that approach a sound economic approach to trying to deal with the issues like cost of living, the wider issue of cost of living and the cost of food?
Yeah, Pai, if I go back to our brother's kōrero, and his pātai, part of his pātai was, we produce so much food, why are we not allowed to distribute it ourselves? And this is all things that are tied to the existing model. The existing model keeps us entrapped in a capitalist paradigm. It's all premised on the need for internationalism and all of those things. All the while, our people are in poverty. All the while, things get worse in our own country. All the while, we produce enough food to feed 40 million people, yet we've got whānau starving in Aotearoa.
Look,
all of that stuff needs to be reconsidered. It needs to be challenged. And our Kai sovereignty policy is a policy that challenges that very thing.
Look, if I may intervene, we're not all about the doom and gloom that Tākutua is talking about. If I think about what iwi have to offer, I think of Ngāi Tahu orchards, and I think of the abundance of apples and kai that they have been able to distribute around the takiwā for free to our marae, to our communities. We're doing it ourselves. We don't need the government to actually intervene on all of these activities. Our iwi are being able to support each other, just like we did through the cyclones and disasters. We are very resilient people in our own right. So I think we shouldn't knock ourselves too much.
We shouldn't settle for poverty. We shouldn't settle for poverty on the basis that we're resilient.
In terms of what we have delivered as a Labour government, as I've said, record boosts to the incomes of those that need it most.
I just want to pick up on your point, though. How do you give greater access to the likes of the Ngāi Tahu that you're talking about there, to the supply chain that breaks the duopoly that we have in the country now, which is one of the major issues?
Well,
they don't have the will to do it.
We've got studies ongoing through the Commerce Commission into the supermarket sector. We have broken down, we've introduced legislation and a range of measures which looks to really hold that duopoly accountable. But I think there are also opportunities for Māori to take the initiative ourselves. And I know of groups who are looking at other supermarket chains and bringing in new franchises, being new players in the market, setting up our own supply chains.
I've got to go to a break, but just one final point to you, Tākutua. That's a fair point, isn't it? That's one way of being able to do it?
Yeah, that's one way of being able to do it, but you can't do it. That's the problem.
We're going to take a break here. We'll come back with more after this. We're going to be talking about Te Tai Ao, the environment. Stay with us. We have more of our hui Te Tai Tonga debate with the leading candidates after this short break. E rere tonu ana ngā mihi kia koutou katoa. E rere tonu ana ngā kōrero a tā tātou hui. You're watching our hui, Te Tai Tonga electorate debate, and we have the leading candidates here with us. From Te Pāti Māori, Tākutua Ferris, and from Te Pāti Reipa, Rino Tiri Kātene. Let's have a listen now to the second of our questions from voters of the electorate of Te Tai Tonga. Kia mātaki take ake, kia whakarongo tātou, mea nei te pātai i te takiwā.
Kia ora, my name is Timurai Kaiho. And my biggest concerns are the environment. So how are we going to fix the environment? What things we can do? Obviously, it's a big crisis at the moment with all these climate change things going on, and you know, our waterways here are not the healthiest. And my question to you is, what are you going to do to fix this, and how are you going to work with the people to remedy this situation? Because in my eyes, they are the people to go to. You know, we had our own traditional ways of dealing with the health of our water and the health of our environment, and I think the most important thing is to kind of look at those and see how they worked and how they can work today in this modern day lifestyle. So yeah, my question to you is, how are you going to fix this for us today?
Tēnā koe te marae, tēnā koe I tēnā pātai. Let's get answers for you now. Let's begin with you, Tākuta.
Well, oranga whenua, oranga tangata is the base of the kaupapa for Te Pāti Māori. With regards to our taiao, when the taiao is healthy, the people will be healthy. But really, when it comes to looking after our waterways, our takutai, our lands and all of these things inside of Aotearoa, we can't approach that without approaching the economic model that the country is premised on. We've had a low value, high production primary industries model for far too long. It's been around for more than 50, 60, 70 years, and it's enabled the farming community, the primary industries community, to primarily do one thing, and that's drive up volume. Volume has been at maximum in this country for far too long, and it's led to the degradation of every waterway across the Te Waipounamu, nearly every takutai, every bay, every whanga, and those are the things that we really need to be talking about. There is transition out of fossil fuels and those are more high-level aspects of addressing climate change, but things on the ground for us, how you get a clean awa so you can still pick the tuangi out of it, how you get clean manga so you can get watercress out of them, those types of things, they need a conversation about the economic model that we've been relying on for far too long.
Reno Tirikatene, your response to Te Marae.
We have to continue to work hard to protect and restore our environment, our taiao. We have introduced the new resource management legislation. That is a new era now for how we implement our resource management decisions and also the planning framework as to which we will all operate under. So we have also put more Māori into local authorities to make those decisions over the local environment as well in planning areas. So I think, and I'm also proud that I put Ngai Tahu representation permanently onto the Environment Canterbury Council. So we have to continue to advocate, work with our mana whenua, and as we have been doing as a government, working in partnership, respecting our mana whenua, including them in decision making, making sure that they have positions at the top table to be able to, we're all in this together, all of the users, whether it's the farmers, the urban users, the communities, we're all in this together, so we all have to do it to restore the taiao.
And I think one of the key points that Te Marae made was around being able to access our practitioners. Tangata tiaki, I mean, I remember in the Ngai Tahu claim, the 9 tall trees, one of which, a key part, was mahinga kai. So how do you increase the exposure or the accessibility or the opportunity to our practitioners, to our kaitiaki, tangata tiaki, in a much more representative and a much more mana-enhancing way going forward?
Well, if I look at the tangata kaitiaki example, obviously, yes, mahinga kai is who we are, a coastal people, fisher people. I'm proud of the work that we are doing to encourage the creation of, just recently, 4 more mātaitai across Te Waipounamu, but we need to do more than that. As I say, it's more than just sort of writing an authorisation. It's about actually being able to work with the key stakeholders together, integrated, to manage the natural environment, to manage, for example, the coastal environment for where we collect our kaimoana as well. That's the approach that we're taking.
Tākuta, specifically in the tautonga, same question to you again. How do we increase the access and ability to our expertise to be able to help with some of the issues we're facing, particularly with climate change now?
Yeah, kia ora. Te tiriti-based representation at local government. If we don't have representation at local government, the decisions that are made out there in New Zealand whānui, that's where the decisions that have a greater impact on regional taiao. Regional taiao.
And we've
so if I'm at home in Te Hora, in Ngāti Kuia land in Te Tauihu, I need to be able to have a say right there. Okay? I need to have a voice that's permanent, a voice that doesn't come and go with elections, a voice that's properly funded so that we can influence how things are going forward and that we are resourced well enough to do it. We have the knowledge. There's 1,000 years or more worth of knowledge of our existence in this whenua, and we understand what the challenges are. What our Pākehā counterparts often don't have is the will to do it when their funders and other parts of the community don't like it.
We've already achieved landmark reform through the creation of Māori wards and the representation of Māori on to councils. That's a huge breakthrough. That's changed the face of local government across our country. So we are moving in that direction. And likewise, the mātauranga Māori and all of those concepts and that we have, we need to harness that in our planning decisions.
So you raise mātauranga Māori. How are you going to do that? Because we are facing a big impact, particularly on the West Coast, when you know that earthquake is coming. And we've seen mātauranga Māori responses to things like climate change through people like Matua Rere Tamakia. How do you do that in Te Tai Tonga?
We recognise it through all levels of academia, through the research institutes. We are doing that. We are recognising mātauranga Māori. We are funding mātauranga Māori, but we need to do much more. I'm not saying everything's perfect. We can go a lot further because we see the value. If we look at the Kodi Dieback, for example, up in Te Tai Tokero, major, you know, that mātauranga Māori could hold the key to be able to, you know, ensure that we look after the ngahere.
It's the same question to you, Takuta. How do we expedite that process? Because when you talk about that treaty representative model that you talked about, particularly with a prospective change of government, how are you going to make that work?
Well, we have to just insist that it's the option, Julian. And for Te Pāti Māori, an independent Māori Climate Authority would be the way. It has to have complete autonomy. It needs to be able to protect the IP in mātauranga Māori. Mātauranga Māori is kicked around fairly loosely and freely these days as a term, but as it becomes more important in producing solutions going forward, it needs to be protected and it needs to be funded properly.
And we're doing a whole of government approach to those very issues. It's a long, ongoing work program, started by Nanaya, carried on by Willie, and we need to carry on that work because it is such an important area for our people, but also potentially for trade, which is my area, in terms of our Indigenous connections.
Let's get specific around Te Tai Tonga then. What are you going to do in the next 100 days after the election that will have the biggest impact for the people of Te Tai Tonga to be able to address some of the environmental issues that were raised by Te Mara?
We need to support our councils, our papatipu runanga, our communities, and listen to find out what the needs are. There are power structures at play there, as we all know, in terms of councils. We need to empower the communities, and we're doing all the work already, whether it's in the water zone groups, we're bringing those groups together to work out those issues. We can't necessarily do things top down, but we do have a resource management regime in place with the Natural Built Environments Act and the Spatial Planning Act. Those mechanisms, when they do come on stream, will provide a greater opportunity and better planning for Māori.
Takuta, same to you. What are you going to do immediately? What are we going to see immediately, significantly?
Immediately, I'd call a hui of all of the runaka of Ngaitahu and the 8 iwi in the top of the south and get to the crux of what's most important for the iwi, the people, the tangata whenua of that land. From there, we could build out to the broader considerations for te ao Māori, but that would be the first thing that I would do.
Why don't we know that now?
That's a good question.
Well, we do know that now. We know that why Māori, why order is fundamental. Our waterways, we've been working on these for years. It's going to take years to actually clean up.
It shouldn't take
years to clean up. But we're already doing it. We're already doing it.
Not at all. It shouldn't take years to clean up. These things can be dealt with within a generation. They don't need to drag on forever and a day. That's it. Don't accept that.
We've got more to talk about. It's really revving up. It's Whaita Kōrero. We have much more to talk about after the break from our leading Te Tai Tonga candidates. Stay with us. Kia ita tunu maira e ngā iwi. hoki mai anō rāku tū ki tā tātou hui e ata te tiro atuana ki te rohe pōti o te taitonga, and we have with us the leading candidates for the Te Taitonga Electorate, Tākuta Ferris from Te Pāti Māori and Rino Tirikātene from the Labour Party. There is a big court case happening at the moment that actually went to the Supreme Court in 2017. Of course, I refer to the Nelson Tents case represented by Wakatu Incorporated. Why has that gone to the court? Why was that not settled when the Supreme Court decision came out? Reno, you're the MP at the time.
Because the case has not been completed. That was just the initial first phase of the litigation, and now there is a remedies phase which they are now having hearings into. So look, it's a very complex, long-running case, but it's essentially about the assertion from Wakatu Incorporation on their private law rights under trust law that they have, that the Crown as their fiduciary has failed to honour its obligation in terms of setting aside the Tents reserves to those people.
See, I thought that could have been remedied in a discussion and a negotiation between Wakatu representing the claimants and the Crown, i.e. the Minister.
Well, I think we need to obviously let the judiciary and the judicial system do its thing. I'm the Minister for Courts, but it is not my domain to even wade anywhere near a judicial court decision. Yeah. However, we need to ensure that process plays out, and then at an appropriate time in the future, there may be an opportunity to be able to come to some resolution with Wakatu. But we also must remember that we have comprehensive treaty settlements that have taken place across all of Te Tauihu, the same common whānau. You know, so you're looking at, some specific property rights issues which could have far-reaching implications right across the motu.
And as you say, this isn't a treaty negotiations process, right? So, Tākuta, how do we resolve this issue quickly for the benefit of all those claimants and all those people of the Nelson Tents Trust?
Well, the government should just recognise that they failed to set aside the 10th of the land as the place was settled and the cities were built. They know they failed to do it, so why on earth they're taking it back to the courts and litigating, sucking up resources out of Wakatu and out of the iwi in the top of the south is far beyond me. The Crown knows it's in the wrong. The Crown knows that there's a precedent there. They understand that they didn't do what they guaranteed they would do and that it came at a cost to the people of Whakatu and Te Tauihu Te Waka o Māui.
And I think we need to actually correctly state that Wakatu is not a party, although they might be an entity.
Clear on that.
They are not the recognised party of the descendants of the original supposed grantees.
Absolutely, I appreciate the clarification. I want to talk to both of you as candidates. First, Tākuta, you had a go at this in 2020. Rino Tirikātene doubled the amount of vote that you received, over 52% of the vote in the 2020 election. Why have you stood again, given that result in 2020, and why should people vote for you as a result of what happened in 2020?
Yeah, Paiana. Look, I think what happened in 2020 was that the Māori Party vote went from around 4,000 to nearly 8,000. And that was against the tidal wave of red. We were the only party to claw something back out of the tidal wave of red, so that really doesn't faze me. You know, we're a younger breed of Te Ao Māori and we're just arriving and we don't intend on going anywhere. We'll be here championing these things right throughout our lives until the next generation are ready and equipped to stand up and do it after we've gone. Just like we've done in the wake of our own kaumātua and kaumātua. So that's we're not come and go, we're here permanently.
Ka pai. Rino Tirikātene, there is a view that Labour didn't do enough, fast enough, big enough and bold enough to be able to deal with some of the issues that we've talked about here tonight. So why should the people of Te Taitonga support you in that you are a minister of this government and the sitting MP of Te Taitonga?
I think we have to look at it in the whole of the context of what we've dealt with in the past 3 years. We've had a global pandemic, and then now we've had a cost of living and inflation bomb which is hitting worldwide. These are not things that you sort of anticipate when you move into office. So we have dealt with those, very well for the whole of the motu. What I want to do as Te Taitonga is ensure that our people are prospering and flourishing. My portfolios have been around trade and have been around lifting up our economic performance. And I know that by doing that, we can increase wages, increase the well-being and the livelihoods of our people, and also make the connections which I am making on behalf of all of our people worldwide.
You were talking trade. I was diplomatically motioning you to say we're going to close. But before we do that, again, via our traditional tikanga, we ask you both to participate in paper, rock, scissors to decide who would be the first speaker to close with 45 seconds now to the voters, their last pitch to the voters of Te Taitonga. We start with you, Taka Te Whiros.
O tēnā tātou. E te iwi, we're in a very critical point in our journey as a people. We have two options at the end of the day, and if we happen to be in a position where there's a Labour-led government, we're going to need to continue to fight for the crumbs that we get from a Labour-led government. That's been the case for us in the last 3 years. If, on the other hand, we end up with a blue and yellow government, we'll be in a fight for our lives. Now, one thing that we're absolutely clear of is that in either of those situations, we are going to need a fierce, independent, unconstrained Māori voice to champion what's best for Māori, and the Māori Party will do that. So go out and vote your Māori Party candidate in and party vote for Te Pāti Māori. Kia ora tātou.
Tēnā koe tākuta i rā kōrero. Rina o Tiri Kātene, your 45-second closer and pitch to the people of Te Taitonga.
It's an honour to be able to represent our people of Te Taitonga. The real threat that we face is the prospect of a National Act hostile government which threatens to wipe away all of the gains that we have made for our people. Te aka whai order in health, all of our, right across the board. So we need to ensure that we keep the National Act prospect out of consideration. I'm appealing to our whānau. We need to continue the job that we're doing. Sure, we want to be aspirational, but actually we have to be pragmatic too in government. We are the biggest Māori, 7 ministers in a government, but we have to work hard against all the other interests of Aotearoa as well. We have done very well to fight for us and to show leadership in those areas. I'm very proud of that work. Tākuta talks about Aotearoa hau. I'm all about Te Waipounamu first. Te Waipounamu, me ki te waka a Māui, whare kauri rea kohu, te upoko te ika. That is Te Taitonga, that is me as your humble servant. Vote, Rino Tiri Kātene, mo Te Taitonga, Labour Party for your party vote. Kia ora mai tātou.
Rino Tiri Kātene, Taka Te Whiros, tēnā rā kōrua. Ia kōrua kōrero, ia kōrua mahi, ia kōrua whakapuakitanga. I tēnei pō. Thank you both for availing yourselves to be a part of this electorate debate. And can I say thank you both for being staunch and fierce advocates for our people. It is awesome to have two candidates of your strength, robustness, and also of your diplomacy to stand for Te Taitonga. Tēnā kōrua I whakatui o kōrua ringa mō te rohe, and can we wish you both very well for the election campaign up until October. Stay with us. Engaiwi, after the break, our political panel of experts, they are Dr. Lara Greaves and Morgan Godfrey. Join us after this. That was a quick interchange, eh? Ko auraki mai nei koutou ki tā tātou hui. He taumata kōrero kei te aroaro I a ia nei nā. Let's introduce our political panel of experts. She is the Associate Professor at the School of History, Philosophy, Political Science and International Relations. Did that without a breath. At Te Tumu Herenga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington, Dr. Lara Greaves, tēnā koe, no maira. And he is the Senior Lecturer specialising in Constitutional Law, Corporate Structure and Public Policy at the Faculty of Law, again at Te Tumu Herenga Waka, Vic Uni, Morgan Godfrey, tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe.
Yes. Victoria University in the house. Okay, let's jump into this now. First impressions. Lara?
Yeah, I love these debates. I look forward to the Māori electorate debates every election.
Is that because you're a political geek?
Yeah, look, honestly, when you guys asked me to be here, I was like, I'd just be watching them live anyway. But because I love the tone and I love the fact that they're talking about the issues, and I think that that's just been a real positive thing. The Waiariki debate showed that, the Te Taitonga debate tonight as well. So I think that's just, really positive vibes and really thinking about, here are the issues, how do we solve them? And we can see between Takuta and Reno that there's kind of, I guess, agreement around a destination, but contestation.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a really positive thing for the Māori electorates.
Similar means to ends, some variations, but similar means to try and get to the same end, right?
The distance between both our candidates, I think, is quite slim.
Yeah.
The difference appears to be how far and how fast, with the Labour Party maybe on the more incremental end and Te Pāti Māori arguing for something, harder and faster. How people vote based on that is hard to say. I mean, it seems that, history would tell us that actually Māori voters tend to be more incremental than they do radical, because generally speaking, Māori voters always return a Labour Party incumbent. So maybe Māori voters actually are more incremental than they are radical. Is that going to change this election? I don't think so, and the candidates both gave a clue why.
Yeah.
That's not going to change, talking about the dangers of a National Act Party coalition. So I don't think the voters of Te Taitonga or any electorate are necessarily going to be too risky with their vote when you have the prospect of David Seymour and Chris Luxon on the other side.
Yeah, can I just say, and I may have over-egged it at the end there, but I just think it's so awesome to have two strong advocates for Māori and Te Taitonga standing in this election. And you look at some of the other electorates, I mean, no disrespect to some of them, but goodness gracious me, who are half those people and what have they done? These guys have got proven track records, obviously both stood in the last election, but strong and fierce advocates for Māori.
And a possibility that both of them do end up getting in, because there's a couple of big questions for me in terms of the polls, and one is around New Zealand First and Winston Peters and the polls potentially underestimating him. But when you look at the last election and the Te Pāti Māori vote, generally the polls underestimated their party vote.
So Takuta Ferris, you mean by that, Takuta Ferris is at 5?
At number 5.
On the list.
Yeah, there is a possibility. It's not out of the rounds of possibility that he gets in as well, and then Te Taitonga have both.
Could we see, do you think, so we'll come to you, Morgan, or jump in, hey, I'm just a tono here. Could we see some really massive strategic voting as a result of the conversation that we just had around the threat of the right? And that's probably not the right way of referencing it.
I wish people were as strategic as we sometimes think that they are. I think that for this, I would say, if you're someone who's watching the Hui debates, get your whānau to get out and strategically vote, because they actually vote as well. That's the other thing, because it's turnout's the big thing for me. I wish that people were as strategic as some of us, and as some of the viewers, I'm sure. But I think for a lot of people, it's literally they're not. But that strategy's not necessarily on their agenda, because they've got to put kai on the table.
Yeah. Higher turnout actually in Te Taitonga in the last election than most other Māori electorates, around 68-69%, 75% in Te Taitonga. They know their politics, they get out and vote. So the strategic question again I'll ask, Morgan, do you think we'll see a bit of that or not?
Probably not, because I think turnout this election is going to crater. It was an unusual set of circumstances in 2020 because we had the pandemic, and people were more or less at home that year, which made voting, which made engaging with politics that much easier. And of course Te Taitonga includes most of Wellington City, so your Māori public servants, the Ngāti Porou types, they're going out of there. They're voting.
There are many others, Morgan. It's not just the Ngāti Porou Brigade in Wellington.
With no disrespect to Taranaki whānui, who are massively outnumbered in Wellington by their eastern cousins. But I think this year, given that it has been a more malicious or maybe vicious election than in previous years, I think that might be a reason actually that more Māori voters stay home rather than go out to vote, simply because why would you engage with something that is so anti-Māori?
And the other thing is that there's no cannabis referendum. And like honestly, like if you like turnout, Māori youth voter turnout was up to like something like 6% or something along those lines. I mean, yeah, come on. We don't have that extra thing to vote for this time.
Thank you for the reminder on that point. I think it's a good point made. Let's talk about the way in which they responded with policy. Both very adept at talking about their own policies, actually. Let's make mention of that. Do you think that there's going to be some resonance there for a voter when they go in the booth and they think about, oh, the way Reno answered that, or oh, the way Tākuta talked about that, that's going to help me make my decision?
Like, I would say that it is more like them meeting someone in person, ākanohi with their concern, and like actually reflecting back those sorts of answers to someone one-on-one. And I think because I'm sure those questions that you put to them tonight, they've probably heard a lot of the ones, especially around the cost of living, when they're out there in the electorate. So I think that that one-on-one connection probably more so, but it may be that, like, yeah, some of the clips and things along those lines, people connect to those from these debates. But it is a case of, yeah, like, I hope some undecided voters are watching and then that help them make their mind up. And as we were saying before, the space between the two of them isn't huge, so maybe some people will flip between the two based on those debates. I think what was really interesting for me was how Tākuta was like really kind of hammering the tax, the structural, the wealth tax, that kind of part of the political spectrum a lot more. And his answers felt a lot more like the structural change, but still they're both quite broadly on the left.
Very strategic, because it appeals to the voter who thinks, and we made the point, not fast enough, not bold enough, not big enough from a Labour government, who, let's be honest, considered a wealth tax and balked, considered a CGT and balked, came up with, you know, fruit and veg, GST off fruit and veg, which actually the Māori Party started talking about years ago. Do you think that's going to get cut through when a voter gets into the booth, Morgan?
I think that will be the main thing people are thinking about, is what party is best going to represent my financial interests, essentially, or how am I going to, or how is my family going to do better over the next 3 years? I generally tend to think that the Labour Party's been quite bad at selling how much they have done over the last 6 years. Rino touched on this. The minimum wage has been increased by almost $7 over the 6 years that the Labour government has been in power, and we know that disproportionately impacts whānau Māori voters who are going out there and maybe thinking, oh, Māori Party Labour, maybe because of the minimum wage increases, working for families, 1,000 papakanga homes over the last 6 years, and so on and so on. Maybe it's a vote for Labour, or maybe that's not enough.
I was quite impressed by their ability to enunciate their tax policies, actually, and the way in which they talked about them to try and make them relevant to the community, particularly when you've got a potential government and a National Party that's got a $2 billion hole, right? And that's probably my fault, because I know Rino wanted to go there with National Act. I was trying to be a lot more specific to Taitonga. What do we think the wider impacts of Winston at 5%, Act at potentially 10 to 12, you know, National at 40 or whatever it is? What do we think the wider impacts of that are going to be on voters into Taitonga, or not at all when they get into the booth?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people, like, if you ask them who they think is going to win at this point based on the polls and based on the sort of buzz that's happening in media, it does seem like they would think that the right would win. So that's where it might be quite convincing to have that argument, and the argument that both candidates made around the avoiding the National Act type coalition, like the avoidance. But again, it's like that avoidance, will that motivate people to turn out? That's one of the big questions for me. It's like, will that bring enough kind of passion for them to actually go and do it? I mean, it's more convenient to vote now, but just hopefully that will be a thing for them.
Based on what we've seen tonight, who's going to win Te Taitonga, Morgan?
Oh, Rino's going to win. Of course, Rino's going to win.
And why do you say that?
There's a history there, because Rino's been the MP for 12 years now, and he briefly mentioned, only in passing, that it was his bill that put Māori seats, or well, actually not Māori seats, but Ngai Tahu seats on the Canterbury Regional Council. And those kinds of changes into Taitonga have been huge. And people in the South Island, Te Waipounamu, know that record. Now, Tākuta has been a very good candidate, and actually comparing his performance in 2020 to tonight has improved massively. But
I'm getting the hurry up from Rewa. So, Lara, based on tonight?
Well, actually, based on the 2017 election results, there is an outside chance that Takuta will flip the seat, just because if you look at the combined Greens Te Pāti Māori vote, it actually exceeded Reno's vote in 2017. So,
and without a Green candidate this year?
Yeah, there's no Green candidate this year. So there's a chance that actually we would be surprised, but it would again be a surprise.
Dr. Lara Greaves, Morgan Godfrey, tēnā kōrua. Always good to talk to people from Victoria University of Wellington. Kia hatia e mihi ana ki ngā kai tono me te taumata kōrero a tātou hui tēnei poe. Thanks again to our candidates for Te Tautonga Rino o Tiri Kātene and Takuta Ferris, and to our panel of experts. Don't forget our debates next week. We begin on Tuesday with Te Tai Tokerau, and then the very next night, that's Wednesday, it's the Tāmaki Makaurau Electorate, plus our show that we record on Monday. It's going to be a busy week for Jules. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa I hono mai ki tā tātou hui. And before we leave you tonight, we also are looking forward to having you join us on the future debates as well. Until next week, e hoa mā, kia mau ki te tūranga o Taputapu Atea, haumi e, hui e, tāki e. Nā te puna whakatongarewa, te hui I tautoko.